Almost 23 years after the United States launched its invasion of Iraq, Washington still cannot stay out of Iraq's business. In late January, Iraq's nomination of Nouri al-Maliki for prime minister triggered unprecedented threats from the Trump administration. Washington warned it would cut off Iraq's access to its own oil revenues held at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The confrontation has exposed how the United States continues to control Iraq's political and economic life, despite the official end of the occupation. This is the story of that nomination, the threats that followed, and the mechanisms of control that allow Washington to strangle a sovereign state. First off, who is Nouri al-Maliki? Al-Maliki leads the Islamic Dawah Party, whose leaders returned to Iraq from exile in Iran after the US toppled Saddam Hussein in 2003. He first gained the premiership in 2006 and is the only Iraqi politician to serve 2 full terms as prime minister since 2003, governing from 2006 to 2014. He now heads the State of Law Coalition. On January 24, after in-depth discussions, the coordination framework approved his nomination by majority vote. The decision came after caretaker Prime Minister Mohammed al-Sudani withdrew from seeking a second term. Al-Maliki's selection reflects several calculations: his profound institutional knowledge and bureaucratic networks, his strong relationships with armed factions, particularly the Popular Mobilization Forces, his established relationships with the Iranian leadership, his ability to navigate Iraq's precarious regional position. Critics of al-Maliki like to blame him for the rise of ISIS, but these allegations unravel when put in the proper context. When ISIS invaded western Iraq in 2014 and conquered Mosul during al-Maliki's premiership, it did so with weapons purchased by the US military. Iraqi army units, led by Kurdish commanders, refused to join the battle. The Kurdish Peshmerga, instead of defending Mosul, confiscated weapons from withdrawing Iraqi forces, then used the chaos to invade oil-rich Kirkuk, and then began exporting oil to Israel via a pipeline to Turkey. Obama even rejected al-Maliki's requests for US airstrikes against ISIS, even as the terror group pushed toward Baghdad. The US president insisted that al-Maliki step down first before agreeing to help protect the Iraqi capital. US officials and Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani blamed Maliki for the fall of Mosul. But in reality, Washington and its Kurdish allies covertly helped ISIS conquer the city, then used the invasion as leverage to remove a prime minister. Today, al-Maliki supports the Popular Mobilization Forces, the umbrella organization formed in June 2014 after the collapse of the Iraqi army. The PMF, comprising approximately 260,000 fighters, became instrumental in defeating ISIS when US-backed forces failed. It now has parliamentary representation and remains a key component of Iraq's security architecture. Al-Maliki has explicitly stated that PMF will never be dismantled, directly opposing Washington's long-standing demand. For Washington, al-Maliki represents a direct threat to its hegemonic project. An Iraqi leader who refuses to sever ties with Iran, supports armed resistance, and won't submit to US diktats. The US response to al-Maliki's nomination was swift and explicit. On January 27th, Trump threatened to end all support to Iraq if al-Maliki returns as prime minister. Trump added that without US support, Iraq has zero chance of success, prosperity, or freedom. On February 4th, the State Department doubled down. We are prepared to use the full range of tools to implement the president's policy and have communicated this to Iraqi political leadership. But what does American support really mean? It's a euphemism for leverage and control. The threats are specific: sanctions, restrictions on dollar flows through US-controlled currency auctions, controls over oil revenues, and escalating pressure to dismantle the Popular Mobilization Forces. For 2 months, US Charge d'Affaires Joshua Harris repeatedly delivered warnings to Iraqi officials and influential leaders. The most direct threat? Washington could suspend dollar transfers from Iraq's Federal Reserve accounts if armed groups affiliated with the resistance axis were included in the new government. To enforce this position, the Trump administration made a personnel change. In early February, Mark Savaya was removed as US Special Envoy to Iraq because he failed to prevent al-Maliki's nomination. Tom Barrak, US Ambassador to Turkey, and special envoy to Syria, has now taken over the Iraq portfolio. But Iraq is best described by veteran journalist Hala Jaber, who characterized him as a 19th century colonial commissioner. But how does Washington wield such power over a sovereign state? The mechanisms of control were built during the 2003 invasion and subsequent occupation. The invasion was launched on fabricated claims about weapons of mass destruction. The occupation destroyed Iraqi state infrastructure, dismantled the army through CPA Order 2, implemented de-Baathification policies that gutted 85,000 to 100,000 officials, including all the engineers, administrators, and technical experts who knew how to run a modern state, and unleashed sectarian violence that killed hundreds of thousands. US corporations looted Iraq's resources under the guise of reconstruction. Iraq was transformed from a sovereign state into a hollowed-out entity dependent on external actors. Today, that control operates through specific mechanisms. All Iraqi oil revenues are deposited into an account at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Dollars are then flown back to Iraq on military cargo planes, with Washington overseeing their distribution to Iraqi banks via the central bank in Baghdad. Based on detailed spending disclosures that include import invoices, this mechanism is designed to prevent funds from reaching Iraqi factions under US sanctions or flowing to Iran. The Iraqi dinar is pegged to the dollar through US-controlled currency auctions. Oil revenue accounts for 90% of the Iraqi government's budget, and US military bases remain operational across Iraqi territory. Thus, sanctions threats can cripple the economy overnight, and political interference continues through embassy operations and funding of favored blocs. As of early February, Iraq's presidential election has been postponed twice, since Kurdish parties remain deadlocked over their nominee, and the president must be elected before the prime minister can be formally designated. The coordination framework continues to formally back al-Maliki, though internal debates are increasing over how to respond to US pressure. Al-Maliki himself has said he's willing to step aside if 2/3 of the framework decides to nominate someone else. But he has also warned that this is a true test of Iraq's sovereignty, and capitulation to US pressure now will only invite more capitulation in the future. Iraq has become a microsome of the larger struggle against US control in West Asia. Al-Maliki's nomination, whether or not he ultimately becomes prime minister, is an act of defiance. The battle for regional sovereignty continues, and Washington may have the leverage, but it doesn't have the final word.